The Heat will have to redefine themselves this season, but which players have the most to prove? The answer might surprise you on today's episode of Locked On Heat.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome to Locked On Heat, your everyday podcast on the Miami Heat, whether you're tuning in on YouTube, Odyssey, or your favorite podcast app. Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day, Monday to Friday. I'm Wes Goldberg, editor at allyoucanheat.com, here with David Ramil. Both of us are credentialed Heat media members, and today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. This summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. We're talking today about the players with the most to prove for the Miami Heat this season. The roster is pretty much set with the 14 guys at 3 two-way contracts. Maybe we'll see who ends up getting those. But essentially, we know what the team is going to be. And essentially, it boils down to running it back again. We're doing this again, baby. And that means that the onus is on the players to, across the board, improve so that we have a better year than last year, where you were in the play-in tournament. Obviously, that first-round exit against the Celtics. That's not the goal here. So we're going to talk about which players on the Heat's roster have the most to prove. So you have a list of guys. I have a list of guys. Let's just go off of your list, make it easy. Not in any particular order, but just pull one name off your list in terms of the Heat guy with the most to prove.
Well, there are a few names, obviously, that you could look at, and they kind of, a couple specifically that are very obvious. And I think they're pretty divisive names among the fan base, and that might give you a clue right there. But there's one name that I think is a little surprising on my list, but I think that Bam Adebayo actually, as the team's best player at this point in time, has the most to prove next season.
Is that because you think he needs to prove that he is the team's best player next season?
That's part of it. I think it's also the discussion of this offseason and Jimmy Butler's future with the team has really migrated more towards, well, now we're on Bam's timeline. And now this is going to be Bam's team plus the younger players that they've drafted over the last few seasons. And that being the case, especially with Bam's likely evolution, and we're not quite sure how much he'll evolve as far as whether or not he'll play the 4 outright, whether or not he'll be kind of toggling back and forth between the 4 and 5. We're not exactly sure until training camp and until we actually see it in game play, whether or not that role will actually evolve. But in terms of the leadership, the production, and everything else like that, and I feel torn even saying this, given how Bam has been such a consistent player for Miami in terms of just being out there defensively and everything that he brings to the table. Like, he has been the hub of what they do offensively, defensively for years now. But there needs to be more. If he's going to embrace the role of being the team's best player, and if he is the future of this franchise and the building block upon which they're going to look to continue to add complementary players, then he needs to be able to evolve into a much bigger role. So I think he has something to prove, definitely.
This is a great take. And it makes sense to me because if Jimmy Butler is going to opt out next year, and whether or not he comes back on another contract or something else, and by the way, he could still opt in. But like you already said, this team is now at least planning on being on the Bam Adebayo timeline. But there does need to be another level to whatever it is that he can be to prove that he could be the franchise player long term, that he's the guy that you want to be. Even if Jimmy Butler is not on this team in 2025, all right, how comfortable are we with Bam being the building block, the one guy that everything, the center of our universe, so to speak? The one problem, I guess, with, or not problem necessarily, but what does that look like? What can he possibly do more than he's already done? And maybe the answer is just score more points, but he does so much defensively. He's so important in terms of a playmaking hub in the middle of the floor. If you want Bam to start scoring 25 points per game with the All-NBA caliber defense, I mean, we're talking one of that, like that formula is one of the best 10 players in the league. That's what we're talking about. And is that a fair expectation of him? I'm not saying he can't get there, but I don't know that it's a fair expectation. The other part of it, too, is how much of it is just what he's asked to do in the past and what he might be asked to do this coming season. Is that maybe more, as opposed to just Bam improving on his own like in a vacuum, is like an adjusted role kind of the way that he can improve or prove that he's that kind of cornerstone piece? I don't know. You know what I'm trying to...
Kind of. I think it's a little
Yeah.
bit of both, though. I think you can ask him to do more, and I think he's shown that he's capable of it. But it's just, I'm not exactly sure why Bam is more comfortable playing an elite level of supportive role player as opposed to what we've seen glimpses of over the course of his career. I don't know if it's just his makeup, and he's talked about this before. Like this is just the way he's brought up in terms of even as a big man, he just he likes the idea of being the hub, a connector, a guy who brings players together, makes passes and stuff like that. But taking that leap to the next level, I think is something he's capable of. And yes, the role has to be adjusted for him to be able to evolve into that. But I think he's also shown the ability to do so, which is part of what makes it so frustrating for a lot of fans that view him as just a really good role player. Like you can appreciate everything Bam does, and at the same time, you can say he just doesn't dominate a team offensively the way that a lot of fans believe he can.
Right.
If that's the case, then Eric Spoelstra and Bam have to be on the same page in terms of being given a larger role and then rising up to meet those expectations. That's a difficult thing for Bam to do. And I know we've made this comparison before, and it feels kind of faulty now looking at what he is. But Nikola Jokic, he was chastised early in his career for being a little too passive, for just being the playmaker. And while he does not do anything close to what Bam does defensively, I think the idea that maybe he could take on a larger role offensively the way that Jokic did in Denver isn't that far out of the possibility. I don't know exactly what that role looks like, too.
Well, I think the problem with that is with Jokic, he can legitimately shoot the ball, right? And so I know that Bam's been experimenting with the 3-point shot, but it's been in very small doses, even with Team USA. And that, if we're going to talk about specific areas where he needs to prove he could do something at another level, it's the 3-point shot, right? And I know he toyed with it at the end of last season. I don't think anybody thinks he's proven to be a legitimate 3-point shooter in the NBA yet. Even if we all think he can be, even if Bam thinks he can be, he hasn't proven it yet. So he needs to prove that. The issue with Bam offensively always has been, if that free throw line jumper isn't going in, there's no offense to be spoken for, right? It's that, and it's transition dunks the few times that the Heat are able to leak out in transition. Either the team needs to play faster to get Bam more of those opportunities in the open floor, or he needs to prove that he could be a legitimate 3-point shooter, that it's not going to just be dependent on those inefficient mid-range shots, or that maybe he can even put the ball on the ground a little bit more, especially if he's playing the 4 spot and attack smaller defenders potentially. If he could put the ball on the floor and attack closeouts, 2-3 dribbles, straight line drives, even stuff more of that than we typically see in the half court from him. Those are specific areas that he can improve on to be a more consistent offensive player, because the problem with Bam always is the consistency on the production, right? Yeah. And it always comes down to whether or not he's feeling it from that foul line jumper. And it's not a good shot. It's an inefficient shot. He has one of the worst shot plots in the NBA according to all the metrics. He hits it at like a 40 to 45% clip, but that's not good enough, man. Like you got to, there has to be more in the offense, and there just hasn't really been that.
Can he be more of a hub? Not more of a hub. Can he continue to be the hub offensively the way he's been used in the past, while still playing a different role as the ostensible power forward spot? Like, can he play that same role and still be able to have those opportunities to attack the basket and play a little bit more? See, that's the whole thing. He has to play off ball in order to have those opportunities. I think in order to be able to incorporate his face-up game and things of that sort, because I think that's the next step for him, is to be able to, if he plays the 4 spot, can he just be out in the perimeter as, I don't know who brings up the ball, Nico, Jimmy,
whoever,
somebody like that kind of gets the offense settled in first, and then just swings it to Bam, and you clear the area the way they have for Jimmy in the past, and let Bam go to work on these guys out in the perimeter, because that's what he kind of needs to do. It's going to require a total shift in the offense in order to give Bam this larger role. But at the same time, I think that's the logical best step for the future of this team.
Right. Well, the problem with playing him out there, right, is it puts the Heat in a really tough spot on the glass, offensive rebounding. And they always are so small. Caleb Martin at the 4, Haywood Highsmith at the 4. But to your point, if they're playing a center, if it's Khalil Ware, if it's Thomas Bryant, if it's Kevin Love, whoever it is, more consistently with Bam at the 4, then you don't have to worry about that. And now you can space Bam to the corner. We're seeing it right now at Team USA. They'll space him in the corner. They'll run that splash action with a guy hitting a down screen like 3 feet in front of him to get him an open catch and shoot attempt from the corner. That's usually what Bam's usually setting the screen there. But if you could put a big guy in front of him to set that screen, I think we might be able to see some more opportunities from the corner for him. And then obviously with that, maybe you can attack a closeout if they close out strong, and now you're blowing by the guy baseline, and that can lead to a dunk, whatever. I think you could do both, to answer your question. I think you could, if it's Khalil Ware out there, you can have him space to the floor to the corner also, and have Bam in the middle of the court doing all the dribble handoff and pick and roll stuff that he's already good at. Maybe that pick and roll stuff, maybe that evolves into maybe a couple of pick and pops sprinkled here and there, if he's comfortable with that straightaway 3. They can even do the angled side pick and rolls too, where he can kind of float down to the corner as the shot clock gets deeper. Like, I think Eric Spoelstra always talks about the menu of options that he wants offensively, and I just think that on that menu we need like a little section next to like the sandwiches and the soups. You have like a get Bam the ball more section, and it'll have like a couple of different items there that maybe Eric Spoelstra could start ordering from, more than it's been in the past, where it's basically just been run, dribble, handoff in the middle of the floor, and then go figure it out.
Right.
And I don't even mean that as like a diss to Eric Spoelstra. It's just they've always needed Bam in the middle of the floor, but if they're going to play him with more size, that just adds more options. So it's a great name. I agree with you. I do think he has a lot to prove. I don't think he has the most to prove on the team. We'll get to that name next here on Locked On Heat.
Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. I love sports. We love sports. We wouldn't be here otherwise. And we love them so much, we never want them to stop. But the playoffs have wound down. You get fewer games now. And the sports, well, they're just not sportsing the way you want them to. But FanDuel lets you keep the sports going whenever you want, because all you've got to do is open up the app anytime, and you can dream up bets whenever you want and whenever you're in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com right now and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. We'll be right back.
Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Miami Heat talk every day, 5 days a week. If you're new to us on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. You can also follow us on your favorite podcast app. All right, let's go to the next name here, and I think you and I agree on this one. It's Jimmy Butler. And I think of all the names that we're probably going to talk about, there might be one other one that you could debate has more to prove than Jimmy Butler. And it sounds kind of insane to say that Jimmy Butler has a lot to prove here, considering his career and everything that he's done for the Heat, and the 2023 run to the finals where he was Michael Jordan incarnate and just destroyed the Milwaukee Bucks, got to all the stuff that he did. But last year stunk for Jimmy Butler. I gave him more blame pie for Heat losses last year than ever before, because he played 60 games.
Right.
He was there for 60 games, like physically. I think he was there mentally for maybe half of those. The guy just was not engaged in the regular season. And I'm sorry, it's a what have you done for me lately league. I don't care about the 2023 run. I really don't. I don't care about the bubble. I don't care about being bent over against the stanchion. I don't care about any of that. It doesn't matter anymore. That happened. It's done. What happens next is what matters. And if you're basing on the what have you done for me lately thing, it's this guy coasted in the regular season, put his team in a really bad spot. They ended up in the play-in tournament. And because they were in that play-in tournament, he had the knee injury, and then he was out for the playoffs. And Pat Riley challenged him openly at his end of season press conference, and basically said in so many words, "That ain't gonna cut it. We need more, and we need more for us to win. We need more for us to reach our goals, and you need to do more if we're gonna pay you another contract, because we don't care about the bubble. We don't care about the 2023 finals. But we already paid you for that. That's what the money was for back then. If you want a new contract, you got to show that you could be there and more available more consistently going forward. And that's the big question for him. And when it comes to what he has to prove, the first thing is the availability part. Can he get on the court for 70 games? Can he be engaged and play like an all-NBA guy for most of those games? so that there's less on Bam, there's less on Tyler Herro, there's less on Duncan Robinson, there's less on all these Jaime Jaquez, all these guys. You're asking less of them. You're allowing them to stay in their lane, not have to punch above their own weight class, because Jimmy Butler is the star player, and he needs to play like it this year.
It's kind of harsh. It sounds harsh, even hearing you say it. I don't know if I don't think I'll ever be ready to dismiss what he's done in the past, but I also understand that he's put himself in a difficult spot now where this is, to me, the second most important defining moment of his career. The first was when he was traded to Miami in 2019, when he came in here with low expectations and people thinking he was just coming to retire and everything else. And he said, no, we're good enough to get us there. And he carried that team through the bubble, through the next couple of seasons, etc. Like, he has been their best player over that stretch. So I totally understand why that was an important defining moment for his career, more so than even being a complimentary player in Philadelphia, one in Minnesota, or even the guy on a really bad Chicago Bulls team before he was eventually traded. The point being that you go out there now, or you have your agent leak out to sources that you want that contract, that you're still a maximum level player, then you've got to show up. You've got to prove that.
Prove it.
And you've got to prove it not just to Miami, but to the other 29 teams around the league, because that's basically who you're showcasing it for. You're showcasing it for everyone to say, I'm still this guy. I still deserve all this money. You're not getting paid for what you've done, as to your point. You're getting paid for what you can do in the next couple of seasons with that extension in hand. That being the case, we still don't know if you're worth that money. And that's how it works. This isn't Kobe Bryant. This isn't Dirk Nowitzki, who played for those teams exclusively over the course of their careers and were kind of paid back for, services rendered. You're still looking towards the future. You said you wanted to bring a championship to this team, and you weren't there during the last playoff run because you were hurt, and you probably would have avoided the play-in tournament had you been a better player during the regular season. And yeah, there are other players on this roster that could have certainly taken on more of a load in order to get you out of the 8th seed, but it didn't work out that way, because if you want to be the team's best player, you've got to be the team's best player, and that means being out there on the floor and carrying the team. So
if you want to get paid like the team's best player, you got to be the team's best player. If you want to be treated like the team's best player, you got to play like the team's best player. And he just flatly did not last year. And unless you've got to be so blinded by the bravado and the history and all this stuff to have watched last season and say that the buck should not have stopped with Jimmy Butler. Like, you're absolutely right. Other guys could have done more. It was not all on Jimmy Butler last year. But if you're the star player, you get the star amount of the criticism, right? There's a reason why First Take is always talking about LeBron James and Steph Curry and all these guys. Those are the guys where, at the end of the day, it ends up on their doorstep. Those are the guys who are supposed to carry their teams, no matter what. That you expect so much of them, but you expect so much of them because they're capable of carrying and delivering on those expectations. And Jimmy Butler, there was a lot expected of him last year, and he did not deliver. And by the way, if he was under contract for $50 million a year for the next 3 years, and we were not talking about a contract extension, I'm not talking about Jimmy Butler like this in terms of him having, I'm probably still saying you got to have a better year than you had last year if the Heat are going to accomplish their goals. But he's not under the microscope this way. But you want a new contract, you got to earn it, man. And yet, and based on last year, everything that all the goodwill, everything that you did earn, if he was asking for this contract extension off of the 2023 finals run, he gets it. No questions asked. You just get it. But we weren't coming off that 2023 finals run. We were coming off last year, and he was not good last year. He was not good enough last year. 46 in the league in points per game. Jimmy Butler was the 46th player in the league in points per game. He's not he's not a scorer. There's so many other things that he does on the court that are really important. Last I checked, still the most important thing in basketball is scoring, right? We can nerd out about steals and jumping passing lanes and boxing out and the hustle stuff and the advanced metrics and the VORPs and all these things. We could do all that. You still got to hang the points on the board, dude. And when you're not, you're asking Haywood Highsmith to do it. And that's just not going to work.
I'm so curious to see when these eventual lists come out in the preseason about where the ESPN top 100 and everything else like that. Because even last year, he dropped.
Yes.
And that was after being a phenomenal player and carrying this team to the NBA Finals on this magical run. And everybody's still like, but yeah, what's Jimmy going to do in the regular season? And we've kind of seen this before in playoff Jimmy and everything else. Now you didn't get playoff Jimmy. You got coasting regular season Jimmy. where is he going to be ranked? Like,
So
Bam is going to be the team's best player by a large margin, I think, around the league. I think he's going to be viewed that way. I think he's going to be a top 25, 30-ish player, and Jimmy's probably going to be closer to in the later end of that. They might be both in the 30s, which would probably be a little outrageous, but that's a very realistic possibility, because I don't think people kind of view what Jimmy's capable of and see him being able to duplicate the past success. And to your point, it was a great one. Like, we develop tunnel vision as people who cover this team and our fans watching and listening and stuff like this. Every star player gets it. Jason Tatum was half traded out of Boston a million times by fans who thought he was a choke artist and everything else like that. Again, my point earlier, Nikola Jokic, a lot of people thought, oh, he's just kind of a big stiff. He doesn't do it. LeBron has got it his whole career. Like, I mean, we saw it in 2011. How many people hated on inarguably the best player on this team and the best player in the NBA, and at the same time, he was just like, yeah, but he really didn't get it done in the NBA Finals. Right. JJ Barea locked them up. Like, that's what you do. You want to be the best player. You're paid as the best player. You got to be the best player. It's kind of simple.
All the time, not sometimes, not during the playoffs only. All the time. You get paid for regular season games. You get paid max money. It would be one thing if Jimmy Butler got role player money in the regular season, and then you got bonuses. Max money in the in the playoffs, right?
Work it out that way. Yeah, work it out that way.
Right? You want to be a role player in the regular season? We're going to pay you like a role player in the regular season. That's fine. This is what the money's for. $10 million
cap hit for 82 games, and then a $30 million cap hit for 16 games or so.
Right. Stop me when it's such a great point when the NBA rank comes out, and I to be clear, I'm not asking you how you would rank them, right?
Yeah.
But to your point earlier, what do you think the national media will do with their rankings? Because Jimmy was pretty routinely top 12-ish on most of the rankings going into last season. I think you're right. He's probably going to drop. Part of that is based off his bad year, and then the other part is that he's getting older. And I think that's some of that's going to be baked into these rankings that come out, in a month from now or 2 months from now or whatever. Yeah. Nikola Jokic, Luka, Giannis, Embiid, Tatum, Shea, Steph, LeBron, all those guys over Jimmy Butler. Stop me when you hear a name that you're like, they're not going to be ranked over Jimmy Butler nationally. All right.
Yeah.
Anthony Edwards. Just stop me when you hear a name.
Yeah.
Devin Booker, Anthony Davis, Kevin Durant, Jason Tatum. I think I said that already. Tyrese Halliburton, Jaylen Brown, Paul George, Donovan Mitchell.
George, because especially, I think, again, there were concerns about how he played last year, age. He was durable, but he was also, backed up by Kawhi, James Harden, etc. So I could see George maybe. He was really good.
Team All NBA case.
No, it's definitely not. So yeah, I mean that was the only one I think is viewed debatable. Yeah, no.
Victor Wembanyama.
I am probably in the minority here. I like what Wembanyama did as a rookie, but I mean, he's not as dominant a player as Jimmy Butler. Jimmy is capable.
I think he's going to be ahead of Jimmy Butler in some of these rankings. I'm just telling you. And I'm not telling you I believe that. I'm just telling you some of these that Victor Wembanyama hype, to your point, is strong coming out of San Antonio and around the league. And for good reason. He's awesome. Yeah. But I think he is going to. I think there's going to be some rankings that have him above guys like Jimmy and probably guys like Paul George and Kawhi Leonard and these sort of established wings. Yeah, I think we're going to be starting looking at. There's other names like Tyrese Maxey and all these kinds of guys. I think that's
there's hype to that.
Yeah. So
whether it's warranted or not, I mean that's kind of what bakes into it. To your point, you have to have good buzz. Like last year, I think Jimmy was kind of 20-ish. Something. I think he wasn't he?
I saw him in top
second
on what ESPN's.
I think so.
I think he was higher than that. Maybe. I thought he was pretty much top 15 all the time.
I don't think so, because I remember him preseason kind of talking about that.
Oh, but what? You're right. ESPN did have him really low.
But and then that was after the finals.
Yeah.
They
were right, because the ESPN rank they try to project for the next season. They were kind of right. He wasn't one of the best 20 players in the league last year. So there it is. All right. A couple more players that have a ton to prove. Tyler Herro. Does he really have anything else to prove here? I'm not sure he does. I think that's going to surprise some people. We'll talk about that next.
Today's episode is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your car alive. And eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers to roof racks, exhaust kits to LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. And with over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions do apply, and eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. We'll be right back.
Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Make sure you're subscribed on YouTube. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Locked On Heat. Let us know who you think has the most to prove next season. Also follow us on your favorite podcast app. All right. I think a lot of people would point to Tyler Herro as the guy that has a ton to prove on this Heat team. And I think he does, just like anybody has something to prove every time you go into a new season. I don't think he has as much to prove as maybe most Heat fans would think. And here's where I'm coming down on that. I think we just know. I think we just know now. The chances, the opportunities for him to prove that he could be a number one option or even a high-end option on a top offense and a contending team, I think we're done. I think we've seen it. I think we've seen enough. I think Tyler Herro is a really good offensive player. I think he's a 20-point-per-game scorer. I think he is an elite shooter. I want to see him more embrace the off-the-ball shooting, the catch-and-shoot stuff, all that stuff. That, to me, is what he has to prove, is that he can embrace a role like that. Not the fact that he needs to prove that he's some sort of star player, because I just think we know now that he isn't. And that's okay. It's fine, but we all have to come to grips with that. And I think Tyler Herro, to me, has to prove the other direction, that he could just be an elite-level role player, a complementary scorer who can help space the floor for really impactful two-way players. That's what I think Tyler Herro has to prove.
That's a tough one. I understand your point. It's kind of like finding a nuance there in terms of how to prove. But I think with those lowered expectations, he might exceed how we view him as a player, and that's fine. But I don't think he can operate. I don't think he can afford to operate that way. Like, it's not just about being a superstar player. It's about being able to prove that you can be consistently damn good. Not just even, I think he's better than a role player. I really do. I don't think he's definitely not a star, but he's too good to be a role player. He can't just be the guy that's your fifth option on offense. Like, I don't think that's who Tyler is.
I'm not even coming close to saying that. I'm just saying,
dude, there are people telling us on a daily basis that he should be a bench player, to trade him for peanuts. Like, that kind of myopic view, to me, maybe I'm misinterpreting it, but I don't think I am. And maybe that's just a very loud minority, but I think a lot of people view him as just a guy who, I mean, it's barely on your roster, a sixth man at best, you know, and that's not a great place to be for Tyler. I think he can be your second or third best. I think he can be your top scorer for sure. I think he can be your second best scorer. Like, I think that's the role for him. So I disagree. I don't think he can be a top scorer.
You think there's still a chance for this, given his physical limitations, the fact that he's just not going to be able to get to the basket the way that bigger scorers or more athletic scorers get to that's not in the cards for him, right? Like, he's never going to be a guy who's getting to the rim consistently. Not in today's NBA. And okay, it's floater stuff, it's mid-range stuff, it's the three-point shot, like all that stuff is good, but he's going to be at best a 2-level scorer, not a 3-level scorer. And it's really hard to be a number one scoring option if that's sort of your inherited, like your limitations, your physical limitations.
I think he can, again, if we're talking about systemic changes and the way that this team plays basketball, because this in the mud stuff has just been, well, it's no longer realistic. He cannot play this way. Even if Jimmy plays better than he did last year, and you change the offense and you tinker with the starting lineup, etc., like, you have to do things differently on how you create these looks. And I think for Tyler, like, Khalil, excuse me, is not he can't be your hub. He's not the kind of guy that you can just kind of feed the ball into. But Tyler has to play more on the perimeter and stay out of the perimeter because his shooting is such a good. It's such a good skill for him, and so he needs to quit trying to pound the ball and try to get into mid range and pull up shots over better defenders that are going to be able to take that scoring opportunity away from him.
Right.
I don't know. I think there's an opportunity for him to embrace being the 3-point shooter and be that next level scorer so that he can mix up his game a little bit. Because right now it's just a lot of over dribbling into mid-range shots. I think that's the bulk of his offense, and it's not effective. It's not always going to be available to him. So something has to change, though. I think he does have to be able to prove that he can be a next level scorer, in terms of overall production and everything else. It just isn't enough. Getting to the free throw line. Yeah, I mean, I don't even know. With the changing in the officiating, I don't even. In the past, we've always pointed to, well, he's got to get to the free throw. He's got to get to the free throw line. He's not going to get those opportunities. Certainly not now with the changes in officiating, if they carry over consistently, which that's a big question. But in terms of like him being able to do something else to bump those offensive numbers, it's got to be the shooting.
Yep.
I think I'm not on. You sound like you've left Tyler Herro Island.
No, I'm all in on Tyler Herro. I'm all in on Tyler. I think you and I are saying very similar things where he needs to be a more efficient player, but realize where the strong parts of his game are. I'm like, if he's not going to get to the rim, and he's not even a guy like Klay Thompson, who I think might be offensively the role that Tyler Herro has to play is like that. Klay Thompson never averaged more than 3 free throw attempts a game in his career. That just wasn't part of his game, and that was fine. Because you know how you get that extra point? By shooting more threes, like Klay Thompson did. Tyler Herro should be taking 10 3-pointers a game. I'm not even kidding. In today's NBA, he should be taking 9 or 10 threes a game. Like, if I'm Eric Spoelstra, I'm telling him, like, we need 40 as a team, and that's been our mark for 2 years now. You should be 25% of our 3-point attempts every night. And I think that's totally realistic if you were to embrace that and stop with this like Drew Hanlon fancy, let's dribble and get pretty in the mid-range stuff. Like, nobody wants that anymore. It looks really cool when you're doing on Instagram and you put the highlight films out there and you do little YouTube compilations and that's out there. It doesn't work in the NBA for most players. It's not an efficient shot, and it's not an efficient look in Miami's offense. So if you are going to streamline Miami's offense, it's more the catch and shoot stuff. And I will give Tyler Herro credit for this. He was doing that towards the end of last season. He was embracing that. He got hurt. And everything kind of got jumbled up, but he was embracing it until everybody else around him got hurt. And then in the playoffs, he was asked to be the number 1 scorer against the team that ultimately won the championship. And that's just not going to be his game ever. Yeah. But he can play off of Jimmy and Bam and all these guys and be an elite floor spacer, elite 3-point shooter, an elite scorer, an efficient scorer, and a very helpful player. But that's, to me, what he has to prove, not to be a number 1 scoring option. We're done with that. In the conversation with Luka, Trey, all that, we're done. We are done with that.
Yeah, that's an interesting point there. Like, I wonder how the adjusted expectations for Tyler now, if we assume they've finally trickled into the front office and they kind of just, maybe we overvalued him a couple seasons ago, but now it's more just getting him to live up to adjusted, lowered expectations and be the best role player. Like, it's funny because we've heard this from Tyler himself, like star in your role, whether he was coming off the bench or a 6-man, these things he's said all the right things in the past, while at the same time wanting as a young player to prove himself. But now that he's kind of fallen short, can he still be effective as a starter and maximize what that role is?
He has the ability to be the crazy thing is his fit with Jimmy and Bam has been so clunky over the years. He has the skill set to be the perfect complement to those guys. That's the wildest part about this. And if he were to tilt his game more in the Duncan Robinson direction and move off the ball and do most of his work off the ball and embrace the 3-point shooting, and when those guys attack those closeouts and there's space on the floor, attack the basket. Go get your layups. Go get into your floaters. Like, that stuff can still be there for you. We're not saying get rid of it. But if like Klay Thompson was a 5-time All-Star, 22-point per game scorer, without getting to the basket, without being a playmaking hub, without getting to the free throw line, because he just
physical tools, though, man.
I mean, he's 6'6", Tyler's 6'5". They're both elite 3-point. Like, I think Tyler Herro is one of the best catch and shoot 3-point shooters in the league, and the numbers bear that out. Like, he just needs to. I'm not saying he's going to be Klay Thompson, but if I'm the Heat's front office, I'm saying, look, what you think an all-star looks like isn't necessarily what all all-stars are. You can be an all-star by doing this. You could be elite. You could be the best in the league at this thing instead of being average at this other thing. And like I said, I think he was turning the dials more in that direction towards the end of last year before everybody on the offense got hurt and left him on an island. So I think he's got a lot to prove in that sense, and I actually think he's going to rise to the occasion. You know, I'm a Tyler Herro fan. I think he's going to realize that. I think he's going to do it. Anybody else?
Haywood, I think, is a name that's interesting to me, and I know that's kind
New
of
contract,
that sounds, new contract, new expectations. You're kind of the guy now that they saw such immense value in it that they wanted to bring you back. So I think that's the name that really stands out to me is, can he embrace a larger role, whether it's as a starter or as your main guy coming off the bench?
No Caleb Martin anymore. Yeah. He's got to basically replace Caleb. It's a good one. Don't disagree. Not the most to prove, but something, right? Like a little smidge of proof that he has to do. Khalil Ware, I have him on there too. You're a rookie. The summer league's been awesome. Not taking anything away from that. Got to see it at the NBA level to fully kind of stamp of approval. The Heat nailed a first-round pick. No, we can't realistically get there yet until we actually see him play in NBA games against NBA players. As impressive as summer league might have been so far. So that was the only other name I had. That'll do it for. Oh, go ahead.
No, Nico, I think is.
Can you be more than just sort of an open the halves kind of guy?
Yeah, like we saw him evolve last year. Can he take that next level? You know, and I think given all of his skills and everything else like that, can he stay consistently and defensively while at the same time showcasing everything that he can do offensively? Whether it's an adjusted role or not, he's just got to be able to be a little bit more consistent as a longtime producer. Because he was a starter, but I think now is the next step where he has to be able to just be better even in that role.
And
so
defensively, he needs to be better on an every night basis, right?
Yes. Fair enough.
And like we said at the top, everybody's got something to prove. Nobody is
Nobody's off the hook.
Right. Yeah. But these were the players that had the most to prove. Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Like, comment, and subscribe on YouTube. Follow us on your podcast app.